All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Truth on the Houndsman XP Podcast Network. And today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by fourth place Wyatt Monen. Hi, how you doing, Wyatt?
I'm doing good. How you doing, Jeff?
I was thinking of you and Hawk, and you guys got fourth in the UKC World Hunt, and which is most people would kill just to be in the finals of a World Hunt. But then I'm thinking about that, and I remember what was that movie with Jackie Moon? Where the semi-pro, where they're fighting for fourth place.
Oh man, I don't know.
Anyway,
I don't think I've seen that one.
Yeah, it's a good one. But anyway, you got fourth place. It was a big deal. I want to congratulate you and Hawk first of all because at your age, getting into the finals of the UKC World Hunt that's a heck of an accomplishment. People can go all their lives. You look at me; I'm an old man now, and I can't get in the finals of anything.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sure it'll come. I'm sure it'll come for you one of these days.
Yeah,
But,
I don't know about that.
It was a pretty crazy experience and whatnot. It kind of has been a dream of mine for quite a while, and that's a hunt that I had just been snake bit as all get out with. I think I went 5 or 6 years to the zones, and I never won a cast until just this year.
Yeah.
Everything, and
how many times has Hawk been?
This is the second year Hawk's been there, but just last year, actually, I took him to the zone in Iowa, and my first night, I just got beat. I needed to find a couple of my coons, and it was actual legit dens and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
He typically doesn't look too good when it's a little hotter, and it was a little hotter down at that hunt, and I ended up getting him started on some thyroid pills and everything about 5 days before we went out here to Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I don't know what your thought on them thyroid pills is, but when I had Clyde, that made me a believer in all that and everything. And I did a bunch of blood work, make sure he didn't have anything underlying that was causing that. And that's helped him just tremendously, even when it is hot.
You said you went to zones in Wisconsin?
Yep, I went to zones in Wisconsin. Yep.
Yeah. What was the weather difference? I mean, was it pretty nice down in Tennessee? I never even did check the weather, but I assumed it was cooler in Wisconsin the weekend before than it was in Tennessee the next weekend, surely.
Yeah, it was cooler, yeah. We ended up, so I went down a day early. It's a long drive for me to get there. The Google Maps will tell you, 12 or 13 hours. It'll take you 14, though, if you go straight through.
Yeah.
So I ended up going over sleeping in my truck, actually, on the east side of Kansas City once I got through there, and then finished the drive off and got there right around noon or 1 o'clock on Wednesday before the hunt. And it was so stinking hot. It was probably over 100. And
Yes.
I didn't have a room yet. I was just planning on getting one there. I figured, well, shoot, there's how much UKC staff and then 104 entrants, and how many of them will be split in one. I figured I'd have an easy time getting a room, and I was pretty darn worried about my dog.
Yeah.
And everything in the box, but I got a room at the Motel 6 and got him in there. But it was hotter than heck that day. But then on Thursday, it ended up being pretty good temp and everything. So
Yeah.
it was pretty nice weather. A little warmer the next night, but yeah, it was definitely warmer and everything. So
When you talk about the trip on the way down to Tennessee, tell everybody where you're from up there in that frozen tundra.
yeah, so I'm a lot of people call me a Yankee and whatnot, just because I live this far up and everything. But I'm right up by Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Yeah.
I'm about 10, 15 minutes from South Dakota, and I'm about 3 minutes from Minnesota. I mean, I'm as far in the northwest corner as you can get. And a lot of people, when I say I'm from Iowa, they don't really understand that.
No, like I can say I'm just 5 miles from the Iowa line, and I've got to be at least 4 or 5 hours from you.
I'm sure at least, yeah. I think it takes me right around 6 or 7 hours to get to like La Plata, Missouri.
Yeah. I figured I'd be about 5 hours from you. So I mean, you've got to be. I mean, I'm gonna just go off the top of my head, but I don't know of any other world champions from South Dakota.
Yeah, I ain't no world champion, but
well, I mean, world finalists.
Both.
I'm sorry, world finalists from South Dakota.
Yep. Yeah. No, there's not a lot of people around here that are real. There's not a lot around here that are real serious into the competition hunting. There's enough guys that like the dogs and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I guess Ryan Sears, he's probably 2.5 hours south of me. He's probably about the most serious competition hunter in the area. And then Jay Bradmeyer, you know, up north about 4 hours or so from me up in North Dakota.
Yeah. Yeah,
But,
Jay's up there a long ways.
Oh yeah, it's a haul for him too.
Yeah. So
what
is the hunting like up there where you're at, Wyatt?
You know, a lot of people think Iowa, you know, a lot of coons and everything, but it's a little different than the rest of the state. So what I mainly hunt is river bottoms. There's some creeks with some good timber on it that I hunt, but I hunt a lot of river bottoms. But when I say river bottoms, it's not just a river bottom. It's a lot of big ravines and, you know, mountains more or less going down towards the river bottom. So, you know, there's not a road within a mile of the river in a lot of spots. So it's big woods. Yeah. Big hilly for the most part. And the hunting's different. The coons move out around here, I feel like, but I might just be crazy.
What about when it gets wintertime? How late do you guys hunt in the year?
So the last couple of years I've slowed down a lot with hunting in the winter, but I used to hunt all through the winter. We actually had a cast up here. I scheduled hunts all through the winter, actually, when I first started up my PKC club.
I remember one weekend you guys had a hunt when it was like 20 below or something crazy.
Yeah, negative 22 or 24 for the wind chill, and we actually treed coons. So
really,
that's when I was hunting Clyde. He missed a layup by a tree, and the other two in the cast were John Vanderwhite. He was Smiley, and Tim Lavoie was hunting Devin Maker's Bandit dog. Mm-hmm. And Bandit ended up, I think he had a den, and I think he had a piece of a coon, and he might have had a coon on his own or something, but we actually scored coons in that 1 hour hunt, believe it or not. I treed one up a bush that he had pushed out of a cattail slough, and I missed a layup by a tree. We had to circle. It was a big cottonwood. And then I think Smiley might have treed one, and I think Bandit might have treed one as well. So it ended up being actually treeing some coons, but boy, that was miserable.
It had to be.
I think the air temp I think was six below, but it was, with that wind, it's horrible.
How do you let's back up. Let's go ahead and just back up all the way to the beginning, Wyatt. How on earth, being up there where you're at, did you get exposed to competition coon hunting, you know, and coon hunting in general?
So for the coon hunting in general, my dad didn't always have dogs, but it's kind of a funny story how he got dogs. So his grandpa, my great grandpa, was all for him getting dogs. This is back when fur prices were pretty good, back in probably the late 80s or so. Yeah. And he ended up, his mom and dad, my grandma and grandpa, Roger and Cheryl, they said he couldn't have a dog. So then, he couldn't have one there, is what they said. So then my great grandpa Swede, who lived across the road from him when they lived in town yet, he said, well, you could get one, keep it at my place. So he got a couple dogs, and he kept them across the street at my great grandpa's place. Yeah. So that's how he got into hounds when he was probably in his early teens or so.
What kind of dogs were they?
So his first two that he had were, I think, a blue tick and a red bone. Yeah. And I think the red bone actually ended up being something pretty decent, but the blue tick, he wasn't anything. But he ended up pretty quickly. He actually won the Red Fern Award that UKC used to do, where they'll give you a light and a pup and everything else, and the walk with wick book.
No kidding.
Yeah, he won that back in the day, and he got a dog named RFA. He named it RFA for Red Fern Award, Sweet River Ruby. Yeah. She was out of Carl Carroll's English dogs out in Ohio. And I think he made her a night champion, might have got her a couple wins. You know, she was just a pretty decent dog. She wasn't the kind that could really rack up a score, but, you know, if you had a tough night, she was going to show you a coon from what I heard. I don't remember hunting with her much. I did when I was real little, but I don't remember much about her. But the first real good dog he got was a Deepwood Surgeon's Hank, also from Carl Carroll. Yeah. And that was I think that one was out of Surgeon's Blue. And I think Ruby ended up being out of Patch, and might have been some Loomis breeding. Yeah, this is old English breeding back there. But that's what he ran for years, mostly English dogs. You know, I remember a couple Walker dogs coming through here. One was named Ruth. They did some winning in Western States PKC with her. Yeah. Him and Tim Hoyt partnered on quite a few dogs. And that ended up, that's just kind of how I got into it. I would go with my dad and Tim for a little bit there when they were hunting together quite a bit. they were owning some dogs, running the Western States race and everything. You know, they had some pretty decent red bones and English dogs, honestly, and a walker here and there. And then my dad ended up sort of slowly getting out of it. I think the last big hunt, or last actual hunt he went to before I started up my PKC club, was probably the 2008 AKC South Dakota State Championship.
Really?
He won that with Chigger, a dog that we had. And that's about the first dog I actually started hunting. But Chigger was sort of I think he was a rooster and hard time bred type English dog. But he still had some old dogs around. He sort of give the old dogs to my uncles when he was done competition hunting them, and they'd hide hunt like crazy all through high school.
Mm-hmm.
That's back when furs were still worth something. And that's just kind of how I got into it. You know, we've always been, my grandpa owned a fur shop, so we've always been into fur handling. And,
I didn't know that you guys had a fur shop.
Yeah, my grandpa owned it back in the day with a couple of my great uncle and whatnot. That was back in the day, actually. But he's always had the stuff, and we've always had like the skinning machines, flesh and beams, all the boards and everything else. So, you know, I was just always into the fur handling and hunting. So,
when you had that first shop, what's the biggest coon ever come through there, you think?
I couldn't tell you, honestly. Because
you look at them northern states and the size of some of your guys' raccoons. Gee whiz, they're big.
Yeah, I always tell people I have a bunch of coons that I have tanned and hanging on my wall, and I've got, I think, 3 of them that are under 25 pounds that are hanging on my wall, and they're just color phased ones. That's why they got tanned. But about every coon over on my wall is over 30 pounds.
I've been looking for, I don't know how many coons. I pack a scale in my vest now during coon season, and I don't know how many coons I've weighed. I swore were 30 pounds. I cannot. Down here, it's hard. It's impossible to find a 30-pound coon, I think. We'll get them in the 25 to 28-pound range. 28.9, I think, is the biggest one I ever weighed. But, they're you guys got 30-pounders up there, and that people don't understand, I don't think, how big a 30-pound coon is. That is huge.
They're pretty big. I've got some pictures with a dog tied back to a fence post or a sapling, and then I've got a coon laying out there with the rifle in front of it, and that coon's as long as a Ruger 1022.
Yeah, they're monsters. When they get 30 pounds, they are monsters. So what about you said you started competition hunting with that little English female? Is that right?
No, so that's where my dad started competition hunting.
Yeah.
Back in the day, and I just sort of got exposed to it always being around. I think I walked with, when I was really young, on a $30 cast, or it might have been a $10 cast back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Just PKC hunt during the week. There was just a couple guys showing up at it. I think I might have walked with on that, but my dad was a little worried about me competition hunting. And I was hungry for it. I really was. I never went to a youth hunt or anything back in the day. It's kind of a funny story about my first hunt that I got into. I probably should back up a little bit before that.
Go ahead.
My dad had quit hunting for the most part. He'd still hunt a little bit, but he was all but done with the competition hunting and everything. And the old dogs that he had, a couple of them had died off at my uncle's place just from old age, or my grandma's place where my uncle still lived back then. And it was probably about 2012 or 13. We crossed the last 2 English dogs he had, Chigger and Bella. And we got those pups, and Chigger and Bella ended up basically dying before the pups were ready to start. They were both old also at the time. So I really didn't have much to hunt. I got to take him a little bit with Chigger, and he was starting to break down. He was starting to break down. He got cancer pretty bad. So I didn't get to hunt him much. So for quite a while, I walk hunted English dogs through high school.
Yeah.
I was 14, 15. I would drive out, 15, 20 minutes to the Big Sioux River, and I'd walk hunt these English pups. And there's one, he'd go hunting, but he wouldn't tree. I had one that would tree coons, but she was too smart for her own good.
Yeah.
And then I had my uncle's that was a little bit of a tree monster at the time, and we used him. I hunted him too a little bit, and it was just sort of all 3 of them that I would take out and walk hunt them basically. And I didn't really have anybody I hunted with. I had some classmates and friends of mine that went with quite a bit, but I was driving out there before I even had a license, and I was walk hunting these. Well, my dad tried going with a couple times, and then figured out I needed a dog. So he started making phone calls and calling, and we tried a couple of them that were just terrible.
Yeah.
We ended up bringing him back and everything, and he called Paul Gibson from Jasonville, Indiana, is what my dad did, and he hadn't talked to him in years. You know, he had drawn him a time or two, and they got along real good. Paul always had a really nice English dog, is why my dad called him. And he put me on to his neighbor, or he put my dad on to his neighbor, Tom Gamble.
Yeah.
He had this, I think, a 5-year-old female that he said he'd part with, and she was actually pretty cheap. I think she was only $600 is all he wanted for her. Well, I think I was 15 years old, and me and my uncle, we drove out to Indiana, and just to hunt with this dog. And I mean, looking back on it now, I mean, that's insane to drive to Indiana, 1,000 miles from my house, to hunt with a $600 dog.
Yeah.
And it was snowing all the way out there. It was snowing when we got out there, and they were not very optimistic about hunting. And we wanted to go anyways. Well, this little bitch, she treed a coon right out of the truck with this old dog with another old dog that he had that was pretty nice. And then we recut and they got split. And I think Annie had a coon, the one we were looking at, and then she ended up treeing again. Split quite a ways at the end. We drove around to her and she had a coon. We give him the money and headed back to Iowa.
I'd reckon. You find me another one of those for $600 hauler.
No, absolutely. That bitch was actually out of Mike Gilbert's doctor dog.
Really?
This is way before I knew who Mike Gilbert was or anything. And the bitch that Annie was out of was actually out of Zeb again.
No kidding.
So, you know, this is a pretty good bred up bitch. And then Paul Gibson, he had said that they had crossed with his male Dumas before.
Mm-hmm.
And Dumas was out of Elvis Attack and a Yadkin River female.
Yeah.
So we ended up, he said we can make that cross again because the first one turned out pretty good, he said. So we ended up driving back home and whatnot, and we started hunting this female. That's right in the middle of winter, and, you know, we're treeing some coons. I mean, she's taking all these sorry English pups hunting and whatnot, and she actually is a pretty decent, nice, common dog. I really enjoyed that female while I had her. But that was my first decent dog that I'd had, actually, that I actually had myself, and she was the first dog I actually put in a competition hunt.
Was it a PKC hunt or a UKC hunt?
It was a UKC hunt over in Bigelow, Minnesota.
Yeah. And
my dad didn't really want me to competition hunt. He didn't think he said the dogs I had, they weren't really up to competition standard, and I believed him and whatnot. You know, I really didn't think they were that great either, but I liked hunting them during the week. You know, I was 15 years old, and I like treeing coons. I like going out there and listening to the whippoorwills and tree some coons. But I ended up finding I'd always read his Bloodline magazines, and I read this Bloodlines magazine, and I found a hunt that was scheduled in Bigelow, Minnesota. So I told him, I said, I'm going to go hunting over on the Rock River tonight. And this is before I even have a driver's license yet. And said, that's fine. I drove over to that hunt, and I didn't really know anything. You know, I knew I had to strike and tree my dog, and that was. So
you drove all the way over into Minnesota without a driver's license?
Yeah, I did. It's only about 40 minutes from my house.
Yeah, but still.
Still, yeah, it was just down Highway 9, and I think I treed her 3 times in the first 10 minutes. And I still almost won that cast. I still only lost by a quarter. I treated a lot of coons that night. Yeah. And then I didn't go to one for a long time after that. And then my next hunt I went to was also up there in Bigelow, and I did the same thing. Yeah. And one after that I went to, this is probably a year later. Well, the one after that I went to was in Primgar, and it was the same type of story. I got beat because I don't know what's going on. And then I didn't go to hunts for a long time after that, actually. I don't know, they kind of found out about the hunts and everything and got in a little bit of trouble and everything. I just didn't go to much for hunts after that. And, I didn't go to much for hunts, and I ended up getting this dog called Owen. I got him from Casey Gale. He was a little younger at the time. I think he was 3 or 4. And I started hunting him. And the deal kind of was that if Casey didn't come to get him after 3 or 4 months, that he was mine and send the papers on over. So I hunted this dog up, and he was basically like a 3-year-old pup when I got him. You know, he treed coons, but he needed some hard hunting. I don't think he'd ever really had much real hard hunting in big woods. So I ended up really pushing his wheels off and everything, hunting the brakes off of him. And Casey ended up deciding he wanted him back at the end of that time and took him back. And I was pretty bummed out. I still had Annie, and I'm sorry, English pups, but I ended up still wanting Owen back. I really liked that dog.
Yeah.
Well, I ended up the next year, Casey decided he didn't hunt him much, and he sold him to us just dirt cheap. So then I ended up having Owen again, and I started taking him I didn't take him to hunts right away. I got him hunted up back in shape and everything, and I think I still didn't really think he was probably much of a competition dog either, and I'm still at the point where I didn't think Annie was much of one. And looking back on it, it was just sort of my fault. You know, she would have done just fine around here.
Right.
But, a friend of mine, Devin Maker, came over and hunted one night in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
And he ended up seeing those two. And I'd said, you know, yeah, they're not much for competition dogs. Well, they both get split and both have coons, you know, in pretty short order. And they got in there quite a ways. And his jaw kind of hits the floor, I think, looking back on it now. And he's like, we probably should take these to some hunts. So then that next spring, he ended up packing me around. You know, I'm still in high school.
Yeah.
He packed me around to all sorts of hunts, and I ended up making Owen a dual grand in about 3 months or so.
Yeah.
And Annie, I had a couple buddies would go with, and they'd handle Annie because she was real easy to call. Had a real easy mouth to hear.
What was Owen out of?
Owen was out of Zach Thomas's Tree Torch and Rock Dog. He was a walker dog too. And then he was out of a bitch called Mississippi Valley Gidget, which was out of Wild Card.
I got you.
So he had a lot of nailer in him, and then on the top side, and then he had a lot of clover on the bottom, or clover breeding on the bottom, more or less.
Did your dad ever give you a hard time for hunting walker dogs after you guys had English dogs all this time?
Oh yeah, we did. we tried out a lot. You know, I messed with a lot of English pups, and I couldn't find one that suited me, or they all just seemed to be missing something, and it might have just been the ones I was hunting. You know,
yeah,
might have been how I was starting them. I'm not sure, but I couldn't find one that I got along with, and he gave me a hard time for the walker dogs for a while and everything. But you know, to his credit, the hunts had changed quite a bit since he was hunting in them. You know, just in that short ride.
Yeah.
Less than 10 years. The hunts had changed a lot. The caliber of dog it took, it changed a lot.
Yeah, and, definitely.
That was just a lot of it. You know, a lot of the guys that hunt around here, they like pleasure hunting. They like, you know, they just like coon hunting in the fall and whatnot. And, you know, they're not real serious competition hunters that want to go beat the pavement down and, you know, go to a lot of big entry fee hunts. They like going to the local club for the camaraderie, a lot of it. And they just like treeing coons. They'd rather their dog tree this den tree 300 yards here than tree this coon in a bush a mile across this open field. So,
what about
understandably, if they're understandably.
Yeah, there's a lot of times I'd rather tree that den tree 300 yards away than that coon in a bush a mile away too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I see where they're coming from.
There's a lot of people don't like drawing me sometimes just for that reason. You know, I usually hunt something that's got a little bit of a motor at least if I'm going to the hunt. So
yeah, you got to compete at the level that me and you want to compete at. I mean, that's just part of it.
Oh, absolutely. But what I usually have, I don't need around here.
Yeah.
You know, I could be competitive and have probably more fun on these casts with, you know, just even more common dog than what I usually pack. So
when did Clyde come around? Because that's the first time I drew you. I think you were hunting Clyde. I think we drew out at La Plata at like the state hunt or something one night.
Yep. Yeah, that was when I first that was when I mainly started hunting PKC, was when I had Clyde. That's when I got pretty big into it. And that was Clyde was born in 2018. And this is before I knew about super stakes, and this litter just so happened to be born on May 3rd.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the perfect spring super stakes birthday. I had actually brought that female. My grandpa drove me out to Indiana with that female we bought from Tom Gamble to breed to Paul Gibson's male, like they had mentioned that cross was good.
Yeah.
So I actually went back out there and with my grandpa, and we made that cross. And these pups ended up being born on May 3rd, and that was a super stakes cross. And we thought performance also.
Yeah.
And that ended up having a and there was a mess up with that, and ended up they weren't performance. But we made that cross. They were born we had 5 pups on May 3rd of 2017, right before I graduated high school. And that's how he came about. And I started him a little different than I had started a lot of pups in the past. I just started taking him let him ride in the front seat while I'd hunt all these other dogs. Because back then, I would hunt a little bit for the public, too, back then, actually. And I would take him with. He'd just hang out in the front seat. If he wanted to stand around with me, he was just 2-3-month-old pup. He wanted to stand around, that was fine. Well, about the time he was 5 months, I started losing him once in a while. I never put a tracking collar on him. Yeah. He's just the puppy that's walking with, sitting in the front seat. And he ended up just disappear. So I just keep hunting right in the area, and I'd find him at some point in the night. And he'd never make a peep out there. I never heard him opening.
Yeah.
Well, then one night, he ended up going and treeing. I was hunting Devin Maker's bandit dog at the time, along with a bunch of other ones. And he ended up just falling treed with him down there in the bottom. So then I started putting a track collar on him, and I didn't hunt him super hard at first because he was only 5 months old when he came treed down there. But I was taking him a little bit, and he was treeing with the other dogs. He was wide open on the ground. And then one night he ended up just falling off treed all by himself. I cut him loose with John Vanderwhite, actually. He had 2 red dogs, and I cut loose Owen and Clyde. And Owen's getting a little age on him now. I think he was 8 or 9.
Yeah.
And I cut those 2 loose, and John cut his 2, and his 2 red dogs went one way, and Owen and Clyde went the other. And they ended up, they're all just burning something through there. Well, Clyde ended up just sort of splitting off to himself. Owen split off to himself. And Clyde ended up had a coon. I didn't know where he was at first. And he got split off by himself and had a coon. And ever since that day, he had turned basically silent on track. And I don't know what
you said he was wide open when I hunted with him. He didn't hardly say nothing on the ground.
No, he never did. I had a lot of trouble with the UKC hunts back then before the rule change with Silent Dog, actually, with him. But no, he ended up treeing that coon, and I went to hunting him hard by himself after that. I put in a lot of really long nights, and this is in the dead of winter up here. Was, I cut him loose a lot of times, below 0 or, below 10 degrees pretty often. I consider that a good night a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And, yeah,
it gets below 20 down here. I ain't hunting.
Yeah, anymore. I'm a little wiser, and I try not to either. But no, I hunted this dog's wheels off, and he'd get deep, but he wasn't moving in deep fast. Well, with age, he just got a little quicker. And I took him out there to baby stakes, fully intending on winning that thing. And I pleasure hunted the first night out there. I got out a little early. Pleasure hunted with Paul, and ended up he treed 2 coons that night. And then I hunted him another night after that, and he never did get treed, and it was the same story in baby stakes. I took a little minus right out of the truck. I think I took a quarter tree minus or something, and he just started sailing through the country. He was gone.
Yeah.
And I brought him back from that back home, and I ended up winning the first RQE, or first UKC hunt I put him in. It was an RQE at Hudson, and I got high-scoring dog at that one when he was 11 months old. And after that, I put him in a couple of local UKC hunts, and then I started bringing him to Pro Classics to try to get his 100 one. So I figured, if I'm going to go to drive somewhere for a hunt, I don't have any close clubs, or I didn't at the time. So I ended up throwing him in some Pro Classics, and I lost probably 4 or 5 of them. I had a 12 or 14-month-old pup, whatever he was, when I put him in all of them.
Yeah.
So kind of obviously going to lose the Pro Classics I'm putting him in.
Yeah, that's a tough competition change from your local UKC hunt to a Pro Classic.
Yeah,
for a young dog.
Yeah, about all I had gone to before that. I went to a couple of back when Bayard still had a club that Dan Clipperton kind of ran. I took Owen down there a time or two, and I took Owen to the Bear Creek for a week, and I think I went to maybe 1 or 2 added first hunts, and I hadn't won a PKC cast. I was just getting beat.
Yeah.
And it was a different level of competition for me. I wasn't really used to it and everything, and that's what sort of opened my eyes a little bit to some of these dogs that are out there these days.
Yeah.
I thought I had a pretty good dog, and he's just common is what I figured out. But that's kind of how I ended up that's kind of how I started the PKC hunting. I went to a couple. I saw the baby stakes ad. I went to a couple with Owen and everything, and then when I got Clyde, then I just started hauling him up and down the road to them a little more.
Yeah, and you ended up doing pretty well with Clyde there before.
Yeah, so I ended up. I did actually do pretty darn good with him, but I didn't. I just had a terrible run of luck. I felt like I won $72 in Peru, Nebraska, when he was about a year and a half, and I wasn't going to many open events. Well, then I started going to a lot of open events the spring before his Super Stakes, and I could not get that dog's 100 one.
Yeah.
I just could not do it. Well, I won it, I think 3 days before Super Stakes. I finally won another cast. And I had made him Grand Night that time.
Yeah.
And you could see. Well, then I ended up, could not win his 100. He was operating right just on the nights that I was hunting UKC hunts. So,
yeah.
I mean, he was operating, if it was an hour hunt, I was treeing 3 singles.
Yeah.
In the early round, and I'd tree the only coon we saw late. I mean, he was looking good. The next night at the PKC hunt, he'd just fall apart on me or something, it seemed like.
Yeah.
Well, I ended up got that 101, and I doubled up on Thursday at Super Stakes. I only hunted 3 nights, and the third night I ended up doubling up with him, and then that's sort of when it just all changed with him.
Yeah.
I just went on a tear after that. I don't know if it was the age or maturity. Shortly after that, I did start him on thyroid pills, actually, that June after his first Super Stakes. But went on a pretty good tear with him and everything.
What happened to Clyde?
He ended up going through the ice on me.
Yeah.
Up here, I was hunting in a cast over in Centerville, South Dakota, that I was a hunt director at, and he went through the ice on me, and I never found him again.
Yeah, I thought that was what was happening. I wasn't sure, but I remembered when that happened because you think about that. That's a dog that you raised, that you started from a baby, and he rode in the truck with you, like you said, and, you got to start in PKC hunts with him and stuff. So, I mean, that's a tough loss that a lot of people wouldn't even try to come back from, I don't think.
I was about ready to quit. I had a lot of people calling me after that and everything. I was pretty devastated. I had a couple other dogs cranking at the time too, but I had lost his mother before that. She had a brain aneurysm and died randomly. She was 8 years old.
Yeah.
Just a random brain aneurysm. I went to take her hunting one night, and she was all stumbling, acting goofy. And next morning, I got her in at the vet bright and early, and went to get her, and she was dead. So I had that happen. Well, then I had Clyde go through the ice on me, and I had figured that out. What he had done. He was 2.5 when he went through the ice, and I never found him again. And that was just such a fluke deal too. He was 2.5. We went through the ice, and oh shoot, I'm getting sidetracked here. Yeah. So he that river that he went through the ice on, it wasn't that deep of a river, and we were crossing back and forth on it. Over that ice. That's how thick that ice was. Well, there was one knob sticking up, this little log, and the water rolling over it. He was drifting a track. You could see the coon track about 8 yards away, and you could see a couple of his tracks in the ice leading up right to that hole he went through.
No kidding.
It was probably 1.5 feet wide and maybe 8 feet long.
Huh.
And it was a rough deal. And I actually had a truck ticket on him. And for where I'm at, to get a truck ticket, that is some road work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot of miles.
I got one. I was going for an overall ticket and ended up getting a $30 ticket. I was going to a lot of $50 hunts too. Yeah. Going to a lot of $30 hunts. I was kind of running the state race a little bit. He was really on a roll that fall, especially. And yeah, it was right before the truck hunt. About a month before the truck hunt. So I was real bummed about it. And that was pretty rough. I had to tell Jerry, you have to go to the next in line. Yeah. I held out for a week or two, hoping he'd show up somewhere. I'm figuring he probably wouldn't. But after that, I figured out what he had for cast wins. He had a little over 5,001. He had cast wins in, I think, 11 or 12 different states. A lot of states. He had over 5,001 and mostly open events. Yeah. And Grand Night, he was over 60 cast wins when he died at 2.5. So I was really looking forward to his future, but it was just a rough deal.
Well, when I hunted with Clyde, he just seemed real businesslike. He was just going to be through the country treat.
Yep.
You know, that was it. And he was probably going to have a coon, and you know, you could beat him because he didn't get struck, but you're going to have to treat just as many coons as he does.
Yep. Yeah, that was.
And those dogs are hard to beat.
Oh, absolutely. He ended up once I got him started on those thyroid pills. You know, he used to, when he was younger. Well, he was young his whole life, but when he was real little, he would have to be the furthest away to get treed.
Yeah.
You know, he'd have to be ahead of everything. But when he was starting to get a little older, he was treeing behind dogs.
Yeah.
And you know, he was silent, so you know, nothing was on him.
Right.
So that ended up working out pretty good for him and for me.
I know that Con was. People don't believe how much Con barks on the ground when you turn him loose by himself. He barks a lot. He's pretty wide open dog that barks plenty. But you turn him loose in a crowd and he won't say a word either.
Yep.
I'd say that was probably part of Clyde's shutting up too, is, you know, them dogs that want to naturally be alone and they got some brains, they're going to figure out that the more noise they're making, the more they got stuff coming into them. It
probably was a lot of it, yeah. He was wide open, and I think what happened was he just sort of figured out that he could get up closer on coons and, you know, get up closer to them.
Yeah.
He wasn't open too. He might have had a little bit of that in him.
Yeah, but, you bet.
No, he was about stone silent on the ground and everything when I was running him to all those hunts, and I had some trouble in the UKC hunts with that, and you know, that was I don't know, once I made him grand, there just wasn't a whole lot for me there. I think I took him to zones twice also, and I couldn't win a cast with him out there either.
Yeah.
But, no, after he went through the ice, he ended up, you know, I didn't hunt for quite a while after that, probably a month or two and everything. And I started getting some pups, trying to get them started and everything. And I wasn't having much luck with the pups. I'd get some that would tree a coon, but it'd just be quirky, not my style and whatnot. And I had another pup. It was the only male dog out of Owen and Annie. I actually crossed them once.
Mm-hmm.
And they were a little younger than Clyde. He was the only male pup, and he was basically a good training tool is what he was, because he barked every breath on the ground. He was just louder than heck.
Yeah.
And he was real hard tree dog, but he'd get treed all the time. I mean, you cut him on a fence row and everything where there had been a lot of coon scent, he was going to tree every minute for sure, if not faster. And he was just a good training tool for putting pressure on pups. That's kind of why he was still around.
Yeah.
Well, one night I was trying to put some pressure on this female, and he slips off behind and trees a coon. And after that, he just always treed coons.
Really?
It was a really odd deal. Yeah, I'd only sent in PKC papers on him, and his name was Owen again, is what I named him. I called him Junior.
Yeah.
And we'd throw him in for a cast filler once in a while at our local hunts, or the hunts that I have up at Inwood there. And we'd throw him in for a cast filler once in a while. I think he had like $100 one on him. Well, then I started pushing him in some hunts once I got him right. You know, he was the kind, he was just going to be what he was going to be. You know, he was too stupid to take any correction for anything. But he was going to be what he was going to be. If he wanted to burn that deer for 2 hours, he was going to do it, and you weren't stopping him.
Yeah.
If he wanted to treat that house cat, you weren't stopping him. But he was just luckily naturally pretty good with recutting, and he was pretty good about treeing coons after that one day. And I don't know what switched in him, but something did. And then I started pushing him around a little bit. And I had won about $1,000 on him, you know, a couple cast wins from other people too that were handling him.
Yeah.
And I went to haul him out to the Labor Day Classic. Mind you, this is about 6 months after Clyde died. I went to haul him out to the Labor Day Classic. I get out there and he is all messed up. He's all stiff-legged and everything. And he just, you know, he can't hardly walk, nothing. And I ended up getting him to a vet out there, and it wasn't blastomycosis, but it was something like it that we have up here.
Yeah.
That's extremely rare and more aggressive. And I put him down 3 days later.
No kidding.
So that was another one I had a real bad string of luck with. And then, and he just died of old age then shortly after that. And yeah, it was something.
Did Hawk come by right after that?
Yeah, it was, it might have, I'm trying to think. It might have been right before that even.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was right after, right before. I was getting to the point. It had to have been right after, because I was getting to the point where I was about ready to quit. I was just sick with my horrible string of luck I'd had over that month or two. I was just about sick over it, and I was getting fed up. And I had actually met Mike Gilbert at the Labor Day Classic, and I was explaining what Clyde was out of, and I had to always specify that he was out of bitch out of the doctor.
Yeah.
Not the witch doctor or anything like that, just silver champion doctor.
Yeah.
And Mike's like, oh, I know, I had that dog. And he was hunting pack again that night that I drew him, and we had a good hunt. I think I ended up winning that cast with Clyde, but Mike's dog looked real good too, and I ended up calling him up after I was having that bad string of luck, and I ended up going out there actually, and I looked at Josie.
Yeah.
And Josie was the one I wanted to buy, and I didn't have near enough money and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I went to go back out there at a later date to throw a down payment on him if they'd let me and just look at him again. And I was actually hunting Hawk's brother. Little did I know, I didn't know this at this time. I was hunting Hawk's brother out there for Paul Wagner at the PKC Black and Tan days.
Yeah.
Or I wasn't even necessarily hunting him for Paul. I was trying him out, and he was a nice common dog, just not what I wanted to pack up and down the roads. And I wanted to take him out there because I just like that hunt.
Yeah.
And me and a friend were going out there, so figured I'll take that dog. And I ended up getting in the final four one night with him. He was just a nice common coon treer. He was a full litter mate to Hawk, though.
Yeah.
Little did I know at this time, but when I went down to Mike and Chuck's after Black and Tan days, Mike had changed his mind on selling Josie. Didn't want to sell him anymore. Well, they showed me Hawk then, and I liked him, so I ended up going back home, getting some cash rounded up, and going out right before his senior super stakes and buying him.
Yeah.
And it took a little bit of adjustment for him to get used to me. He's a little bit of a one-man dog. Not so much a one-man dog, but he wanted to make sure I was all right before he really started doing it, I think.
Yeah.
And, I had him for a couple months, and we started running up and down to some pro classics, and he started doing pretty good for me. And, I had a couple, so I had Junior and Clyde. I think they both had, I know Clyde had a national ticket, and Junior was right on his way to one. And I was really wanting to go to nationals, and I never got to go with either of them. And I ended up deciding I wanted to make Hawk a gold champion before nationals, and he had just over 5,001 on him at this time was all. And, it hadn't been any open money, so, I wasn't in the top 10 of the state or anything, so I couldn't go for that. So that's when I ended up going down to that hunt in Texas. We almost didn't get our 5,001 down there. We had a judge that was blind.
Why don't you tell that story, Wyatt? Because I think I've talked about it on here before.
Yeah,
but, I get a little grief about that about every time you see me. So.
Yep. Oh yeah, it was a close one. It was. I was the first dog treed in this cast. I struck for a quarter. And there's dog split a tree or two away from him. Something Mark Gilmore was hunting at the time. I know he didn't stick with it very long, but something that Mark Gilmore was hunting at the time for Ike Rainey. Yeah. And I think we also had Zach Burden with legs in that cast. This is the late round. My early round, I treed one coon, and that was enough. That was the only coon we scored.
Right.
And that late round, or that early round, that was the only coon we scored. Well, that late round, I was the first dog treed in, and I was way through there, and so was everybody.
Yeah.
And he ended up. I found his coon a couple minutes in, just up in the first four, just all balled up there, and like, that's coon right here. I got it and everything. And golly, my judge just blind her in the back. He would not believe me. He's saying he's gonna minus this tree, and I'm like, I'm about sick. No, that's not actually how it went. It took me a while to even find that coon, and then when I did, I knew that was fur.
Yeah, I could see what you were seeing, and then we just couldn't get it to move. We were beating on the tree and stuff, and those coons down there are so small. There was that little nest there. I was going to minus it. I told you I was going to minus it. I said, Wyatt, you're going to have to show me someplace coon can hide. And you said that nest. I said, I can see both sides of that nest. And
those coons down there are pretty small. They're smaller than what we're used to.
Yeah, they are. But I was this close to minus, and I went ahead and circled it against my better judgment. And then we went over to squall. Mark's dog jealous treed there right next to you, but it had a hole in it. Yeah. And we were squalling that hole, and man, that coon popped up and looked at us. I was sick.
Yep. I was sick too. I had put that entry on a credit card, actually. So I was sick too. I'm thinking, oh man, I got like $35 if I can't pay off this credit card too.
Oh heavens! Thankfully, Hawk went through there because that was the only coon we treed, and it got circled.
I know, and I ended up treeing that other den.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Legs had a den, and then he never did get treed again. Mark's dog ended up, I think he made a bad tree.
Yeah, and see, there's the thing is Mark after in his tree I minused it, and Mark's throwing a fit because he's like, man, he goes, you circled that other tree that had a coon in it. He goes, you can't see nothing. How are you minusing this tree? There could be a coon in it too.
Yeah, that was pretty memorable one. You know, I wasn't even mad at you. I was just sick.
Well, I've said, Wyatt, to your credit, that someone took a bad break like that, and I know you were sick. I was sick for you. I didn't like it either. But 5 minutes later, you were your same jovial self, and it all worked out. Thank goodness.
Yeah, trying to make the best of it. When I figured I'd hopefully just tree another coon, it made me feel a little better when them other dogs had some dens too. Just thinking, well, mine's just got to tree another one, which is a little easier said than done down there in Texas that time of the year.
Yeah, it was tougher down there treeing coons, and especially at that spot we were at, it's full of coons. But when it gets a little chilly down there, those coons don't move at all.
Yep. Yeah, it just shows a little bit how they move different in different parts of the country.
Yeah, I don't think Legs made one bad tree, and that was it, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And then Clifford's dog he was sitting under a coon, but we never could hear him.
Yeah, he is back the other way. I don't know, was he even struck? No, I think he was struck in, but we never...
He got struck in, and then we all walked away from him to those other three that were trailing down through there to split distance, and then you got treed, and we never ever... Every time we would go back to walk towards Clifford's dog to split distance... Oh, no, he never got struck in. We never even could walk to him.
Yeah. I think that is right.
Yeah,
no,
he never once. Yep, he never once got struck in, and he was in there treed the whole time under a coon. That's a good dog. I figured he had a coon, but there wasn't nothing we could do about it.
I remembered you saying that was a pretty good dog earlier on in the night.
Well, he'd beat me that night in the early round, treed 3 coons and looked good.
Yep.
So
you remember that night when the sun was coming up when I was walking out of there. I had to go way through there to get my dog.
Yeah.
And sun was coming up. I got back to the truck. You're still waiting, making sure I got out of there all right. And then I was giving you a hard time about wanting one of them big show sweatshirts.
Yeah.
That you had then. And said, I don't have any more. I said, well, you're wearing one. And you ended up giving me that sweatshirt.
I did.
I wore that Final Four pictures.
Yeah, you wore it in the pictures and everything.
Final Four top 12.
Yeah, that was my favorite sweatshirt too.
Yep. No, I still got it.
I figured I owed you after circling your coon.
Yep, that's what I was sort of going for, hoping I could get one for that.
Yeah. So that made him a gold champion that night. Didn't that cast pay $5,000?
Yeah, it did. Yep, yeah. That one paid $5,000, and then the next night it was really hot down there. Actually.
Yeah, it did. It got real hot. It was 75 degrees or something like that.
Yep, I think that was probably so. That next night I drew. I think it was Heartland Bonnie. Owen Shelby was our judge. I think it was one of Heartland Bonnie's first big hunts.
Yeah.
Thunderbird's Dominator.
Yeah.
One of his first big hunts also, I believe.
I think so.
And then a flip-flop dog.
Yeah,
I think it was a blue dog.
Yeah.
Yep, and that was our cast, and I ended up catching a bad one there, which I was just happy to be there at that point.
Yeah.
But everything's opening on the ground, flying to the right. I don't know if they were running something fast or a hot track or what it was. I think it was probably just a hot coon track. Well, Hawk ended up bopping in there to the left about 50 yards, and he opens up, and I struck him for 100 in the minute. He opens about 4 or 5 times and just drives that track silent about 400 yards and loads up treed. Well, I got minus.
Yeah.
Which he had, Owen had to do.
Yeah. That's a bad thing about a dog that doesn't say much on the ground is you got to be real careful under that minute. Oh,
that's for sure. Yeah. And I know that's what he did on that one, but yeah, so I had to restrike for a quarter and tree for 100 on that, and we scored another coon, but a lot of dogs took some minus, but I sat on 25 plus all night, and then when the hunt ran out, there were still pending trees and everything.
Yeah.
I don't know how it exactly would have played out, but I ended up he came treed right there about 3-4 minutes after the hunt was up. But he was moving around. Sorry, he didn't deserve that cast win.
Yeah.
Mine didn't. So.
Well, tell me about your run at the UKC World Hunt, because I mean, the young guns were in it other than Kurt. You know, there's a lot of young guys. How old are you, Wyatt?
I'm 23.
Yeah, I see. I thought you were 22 or 23. I couldn't remember. You're still a young man. And, you know, Tyler, he's not very old. Jeremiah, Roller, and Kurt were in the cast. It sounds like you guys had a fantastic time. I mean, you kind of caught a bad break. Hawk got out of pocket, but that's part of it. But tell me about the run through zones and then going out into the top 100.
So the first night out there at zones, see, I had just started him on the thyroid pills about 4 or 5 days prior. I mean, he was looking terrible, Josh. He was looking awful, and he was leaving some trees, locating and leaving, treat a couple slicks, and I mean, just stuff that was just so odd for him. I had him at the vet, and they probably thought I was a hypochondriac about my dog at that vet, and they said, he's perfectly healthy. There's nothing wrong with him. And I said, well, let's test him for all this stuff. And I ended up having blood sent to several different colleges.
Yeah.
And negative for all the major tick diseases, negative on heartworms. They couldn't find anything. His CBC test for his white blood cells, that was good.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing wrong was his thyroid was low, and I knew it would probably be low. And I figured there was something underlying also, but I couldn't find anything with that. And the test didn't show anything for that, and his vitals were all good and everything else. And I'm like, well, I guess I'll start feeding him them pills. I've done it before with a dog. So
yeah. That's
actually what I ended up doing. I just started giving him the pills twice a day. You know, I'd been through it with Clyde, so I started giving him the pills twice a day and put him in I put him in a hunt on Wednesday over here at my place. And I had just gone to a doubleheader that I was helping with down in Magnolia, Iowa, actually.
Uh-huh.
And he looked bad down there, too. And this was the Saturday before the zones. Then I got the results on Monday, started him on the pills. Wednesday, I had a PKC hunt at my place, or at my parents' place. That's my club that I run.
Right.
And I started him on them, and he looked pretty good there, actually. I ended up getting beat still, but he treed 2 coons. And I didn't hunt him again until Friday and everything, which that's another deal I probably should clarify a little bit. I was hunting him really hard leading up to that, and he was doing bad. You know,
yeah.
He was in shape, but he wasn't treeing coons. Not very many anyways. And, that Friday I get out there, and I didn't have much of expectations for him. You know, I was hoping those pills would be kicking in by then, but I didn't figure they would be. I didn't figure his thyroid would be up at all. And I ended up drew out with Chad Shima with this a big country dog called Mongo.
Mongo, yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And I drew Tim Nathy, and his dog's name was Adley. And then I drew the baby stakes champion, Tom Brislon. He's bought that straight flush dog from Spurlock.
Yeah.
I drew those 3, and we cut loose, and I strike for 100 in the minute. We cut down this tree line that goes into a big river bottom. I strike for 100, a little bit left-handed in the minute, and that Adley dog actually shoved one up me pretty bad there on the edge of that cornfield. She treed one there, and Hawk sort of opened a little bit around there, and you knew it was the same track, and she just beat him to it, and he ended up just rolling on down the tree line a ways and hitting that river bottom is what he did. Well, Flush got a piece of that coon, and then Mongo's treed about 2-3 trees away, and I'm thinking, this dog is jealous treed. Well, he had a coon too.
Yeah.
Over there. So we pulled them all off those trees and cut them loose, and I tree Hawk in there. We go in, he's got a coon, but on the way to him, the other dogs, Flush had treed and Adley had treed, and we walked right by and everything. And I mean, it was a good tree. They had to have had one there.
Yeah.
And we get in there to Hawk. He's about 1,000 from there, and I get him recut, and he only goes about 700 yards, 800 maybe, and he gets treed again, but I can't hear him. I never even heard him struck. And we were just in a kind of a bad spot for him. We get back there, and the dogs both ended up leaving that tree, and all 3 of the other dogs in the cast swam the river. And I'm still sitting there. I can't hear Hawk. You know, I'm still leading this cast with 225 plus, and I can't hear Hawk at all.
Yeah.
We tried listening, and we couldn't hear him a lick. And I thought I heard him a couple times. And nobody else really did. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to try pitching him in there. I guess I'm winning, no use on trying to talk him into hearing.
Mm-hmm.
But then all three of them dogs get split treed across that river is what ended up happening. And they're right in the middle of this village up there in Wisconsin, across this river. And they had just had a pile of rain. So that river's rushing. So we got to walk to the closest bridge. Well, at this point, we're probably about 1,000 yards from Hawk, and we're probably only 400 or 500 from these dogs, but we got to walk all the way around to this bridge. Well, that entails walking straight away from Hawk still. So we get up on this hill. At that point, we stop and listen. All three of the dogs are treed in, all split across the river there and in town. And I ended up striking a tree in Hawk. We get up on top of this hill, and you could hear him pretty good, actually. And he was over a mile away at this point. You could hear him pretty good from up there. Mm-hmm. So I struck and treed him, went and handled him. He had been treed over an hour by the time I got to him. And we waited there for another hour and a half. Well, those guys had walked around to the closest bridge, and then they had a bunch of trouble with cops coming into their tree, coming in there, people calling the cops and everything. And they got into, didn't actually get into any trouble, but, they had to get the dogs out, and they had to talk to the cops and everything. And they come back around, and I didn't need a coon. I just needed a circle, and I ended up having another coon over there.
Yeah.
And ended up working out for me. Well, I was thinking at that point that 375 plus, I've hunted that Wisconsin zone before, and I've seen 175 plus single cast score get through.
Yeah. So you're feeling pretty good.
I was feeling really good. Yeah, I thought I had it won. Or I thought I was advancing with that single score. Well, the next night, I ended up drawing out with Chad Shima again with Mongo. And Tim Nathy with that Hadley dog again.
Uh-huh.
That very next night. And I ended up there. There's another blue dog in the country, or another blue dog in the cast, and he had a big motor on him. I don't know what he was out of. He wasn't out of country or anything. He was a little older dog, but I don't remember that fella's name or the dog's name. But he was also in that cast. But yeah, I had two of the same guys from the night before. And we cut loose in there, and Hawk opens about 3-4 times right at about 50 seconds in the minute, and I'm not going to strike him just in case. And I end up, right after the minute's up, I take third strike.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, crap, there I did it to myself. I hope that I don't regret that later, is what I was thinking. And I was still going to try to win the cast, but I just really didn't want to draw a minus, was kind of my goal in that cast. Well, the Mongo dog, he gets out of the cornfield here. I mean, we got a nice big spot here. It's pretty steep hillside, but big woods with a creek on the bottom and some fields and, field on the top. Nice big hillside, big woods, plenty of room for the dogs. I had good guide both nights out there, I thought.
Yeah.
They put us in big enough woods, I felt like. But anyways, Mongo gets out of the corn, and he taps around on this tree, and he rolls out of there, and he's checking around a bit, and then Hawk gets out of the corn, and he taps around on this tree too, but right in the same area. And then he ends up moving out of there. And then Adley comes out of the corn, and she nails this tree. And believe it or not, I actually ended up getting a quarter on that tree. I couldn't believe it myself, but Hawk ended up going back in there.
Really?
And everything. Yeah, he did. He ended up going back in there to it, and I couldn't believe it. I think I've seen him maybe once or twice since I've owned him is all.
Yeah.
Have that happen where I don't take 100 or 125 in this case, I mean. And they ended up, we found the coon. It took quite a while. We found the coon. So then I'm sitting at 75 plus, and Adley's sitting at 150. Mongo's still carrying 100 strike, and the other blue dog's carrying 75. And we haven't heard that other blue dog in quite a while. But we walk up a bit, and we hear Mongo, so we get recut. And Adley kind of hangs around fairly close a little bit. That's Tim's dog. She hangs around fairly close and gets struck. And then I get struck for 50, a little further down. And he ends up, didn't really stick with that one. Well, then Mongo comes treed through there quite a ways. Well, we get in there to him. And while we're shining, I hear Hawk treed. So I treed for 125. And he was down at the bottom of this hill. He was only probably 300-400 yards from Mongo.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Mongo's got a coon. Well, then Adley's there for 75 with Hawk. And we go down there. They got a coon. And we recut off that, or we got to pull off of that one. and we hear the other blue dog treeing through there, and he trees it in. And this dog had gone a long ways from where we cut. I've never seen blue dogs with motors like I did that weekend.
Yeah.
A Mongo and that whatever that other dog was, I can't remember his name, but they some of the nicer blue dogs I've seen before.
By all accounts, Mongo's a pretty good one. He was down at Strickland's for a while. Strickland said he was a good one. Chris Powell said he was a good one. There's a lot of guys that like that dog.
I liked him a lot. He's probably one of the nicer blue dogs I've ever seen for sure. Probably definitely in the top 5, if not the nicest. He looked good. He actually did. He looked real good. And we recut off that, and I ended up treeing for 125 up on that hillside, and he was by himself up there. We get to that other blue dog, and he's got a coon. Well, Mongo's treed again, and Hawk had a coon, Mongo had a coon, and that tied us up, but I had him beat on tiebreaker.
Yeah.
How it ended up going. So, got pretty fortunate there and everything.
What about down in Tennessee? How'd that go?
Yeah, that's the first time Hawk had ever been cut down in Tennessee, and I was pretty worried right away going down there about getting room and everything. It was real hot on Wednesday when I got there.
What was the temperature in Wisconsin compared to Tennessee?
Oh, Wisconsin, we probably had it was probably 50 degrees or so at night when we were hunting, 50 or 60 maybe. It wasn't too hot of a day, either of the days out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tennessee, it was 100 the first day when I got down there.
Yeah, that's a big switch for a dog.
Yeah, it really was. But we didn't have to hunt in that, luckily. That would have been terrible. But we ended up, the next day it ended up being pretty good weather, actually. So that worked out all right for us. But yeah, I got him in the AC, and he just hung out in the room for the first day. And then it was pretty cool the next day, so that was pretty good. You get him outside on the grass a little bit. But that night I'm trying to think who we drew out with. We actually drew out with Dustin Stewart and Rocket Collector. Yeah. He was right close. He doesn't live close to me. I mean, close in my book, but not close in anybody's book. He's about 4 hours away, and I've never hunted with the dog, but a few people have told me, a few people that know what I like, they've said that he's your kind.
Yeah.
Lower strike dog, just good about having coons, moves around good. And, yeah, I ended up going, let's see, who the heck else was it? It was Outlaw Boomer was the other one, that young black and tan that, Aaron Walken owned it. I can't remember the guy's name that had him out there that had bought him that was hunting him. Yeah. But drew out with him, and then there was an English dog, and I don't remember that dog or the handler's name either. Sorry if I'm bad about this, but
it's all right.
I end up, Boomer takes a first strike to the left, and then Hawk takes a second strike to the right when the minute's up and everything. He opened a few times. He ran a pretty good little track and just come treed, and nothing else had even struck yet, and I treed for 125. Well, then the English dog come running by us, and then she runs straight in there towards Hawk, and I'm thinking, that thing's going to cover Hawk. Well, she sure didn't. She blew right past him and treed on her own. Yeah. I'm like, oh, man, this English dog means business and everything. And we get in there. Hawk's got a coon, and I recut him. The English dog has a coon. And then Boomer, he's starting to go around to the south, and then Rocket gets struck into the south for 25. So, we got all the dogs moving that way now, which is the way that I had initially been taken off towards. And yeah, I don't get struck in for quite a while after that. And the English dog gets treed again, and I'm thinking, oh, no, here we go. Well, she had a big persimmon tree, and we ended up finding a possum in it. Yeah. And she got scratched. And I think I really do think there's probably a pretty good chance that she was smelling the coon scent, and that possum just so happened to be there. Yeah. To tell you the truth. I think that there's a pretty good chance that's what happened, but I don't know for sure. I don't know the dog.
You never know about persimmon trees. Persimmon trees are poison to everything.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, that's how that ended up going. Well, then Rocket's treat at that point. We go down to him, and he's got a coon. Well, we pull off of that, and I was struck in at this point for 25. And Boomer ends up coming treed fairly close to us. Well, I could hear Hawk, and he's locating, and I treed him. So the guide went with me to handle my dog, and we wait there. It's a big tree down in this cypress bottom. And Boomer ended up leaving that tree, I guess. So they come to score me, and we find the coon. And I recut off of that, and Boomer's treed again. We get up there, and he's circled. Well, I had struck while we're shining his tree. I wasn't too far away yet, but then after I struck, he starts, sinking into the country a ways.
Yeah.
And when we pull off of Boomer's tree to get him recut, we start the 8, and then right away Rocket breaks it. He comes treed the opposite direction of where Hawk was going. So he recuts Boomer, and we go in there to Rocket. And on the way there, he had called and said that he had treed him in again, the Boomer dog, and he went back to handle him, and he said that he left, so he grabbed him and he was leaving, and everything he had withdrawn is what he'd said.
Yeah.
Called the judge and everything, and we get in there to Rocket, and he's got a coon up a bush. He did a nice job on that one, and we're the only 2 dogs left in the cast at this point, but there's about 20 minutes left, and we got to go to where we last heard Hawk and start the 8. So it was a long walk back to where I struck him, and there's 3-4 minutes left, maybe 2-3 even was all. And we heard him treed through there, and we cut him loose, or cut Rocket loose, and he didn't get struck in that few minutes. So I never did have to tree in again.
Yeah.
So I ended up winning that cast with just the 2 coons, and then he had another one through there, but winning with the 2 coons there. And then I got to give a shout out to our guide on that cast. He drove around and everything, and his brother brought a side-by-side down to him, and they drove that side-by-side into that WMA ground, got within a couple 100 yards of Hawk's tree to pick us up, and they had cold waters for us when we got back there. So
yeah,
that was service right there.
Yeah, you need to give them a tip. Give them your sweatshirt.
Yeah, I should have. If I was wearing one, I probably would have.
Yeah. What about your next cast? How'd it go?
So there ended up only being 23 cast winners.
Yeah.
Out of the 26 there should be. There's a few dead casts. It was pretty tough hunting down there.
Yeah.
We were fortunate enough to get a good guide and have some pretty good dogs. We scored 5 coons in our cast. But then the next night, I drew out with Logan Rose with Echo. There was a black and tan dog in that cast too. And then who was the Jack Bingham Jersey girl dog?
Yeah.
Justin Boblet was hunting her.
Yeah.
So I drew out with them, and I ended up taking last strike. They all took off pretty hard and hot on something, and then it sort of died out on him, and this black dog, he stayed there pretty close to the trucks where the trap kind of blown up on him, it seemed like almost. And Echo and Jersey sort of kept going quite a ways, and then Hawk ended up working the same way they were, but in a different area. And he came treed, so I treed him, and we go in there, and I've got a coon. Well, then the black and tan comes treed, so we go to him, and he's circled. Well, I had struck in the meantime, and he recuts the black and tan, and I mean, we had nothing going on for the next over an hour.
Yeah,
those are so boring. Oh yeah, we maybe moved 200-300 yards closer to the dogs. Jersey was really good about keeping the strike open for us, because if it was the other 3 of us struck in, that 8 probably would have caught us at some point.
Yeah.
And we all ended up getting struck in, and this dog's had tracks blowing up on him, and Echo, he ended up blowing out of the country. He ended up opening up on this hedgerow, and I thought he's going to nail one right there, and then I'm going to need to tree another one. And he just opened a bit, and he kept rolling on, and he just I think he ended up about 4 miles away, 3 or 4 miles away when Logan went to go get him, actually. And so that was a bad break for them. Well, Jersey, she carried 100 strike in the beans about all night. Well, there's about 13 minutes left in this cast, and I'm feeling pretty good about my 150 plus. I'm not too worried with how this cast is going, about something else treeing, because that black and tan, he had struck through there, and he come running fairly close to us, not right by us, but he was running an edge sort of past us, just looking for another track, it sounded like. And well, my dog starts running down this edge right towards us with about 20 minutes left or so. And he gets out about 200 yards away, and he opens in this bean field after a little bit. And he opens about 5 or 6 times, and he just inhales a tree about 200 yards from us. And Brandon Berry was the judge.
Yeah.
And I about puke when he does that. There's only room for error at this point. And I about puke and everything, and they're all laughing at me because the way he did it, he had that coon.
Yeah.
And I let him run the stationary for about a minute and a half, and I tree him in, and we go in there, and he's got a coon and everything, and nothing else. I ended up having to recut with 5 minutes, and then had to run him down later on. But yeah, they ended up nothing else to treat a coon, and I treated those 2 there, so that went pretty good. Well, then we had that deal where there was a dead cast in those last 6 casts.
Yeah.
So we ended up deciding. So they proposed us this idea, us 5 cast winners. They proposed us the idea of drawing and whatnot for a 4-dog Final Four. They had a lot wrapped up into the production of the.
Yeah. I think they
show.
made the right decision. That was about the only thing you could do there.
They did, and they brought up the point that there's a decent chance the way these casts came in. There's a lot of casts. 1 coon scored in the whole cast, and that was the winner. There wasn't many coons scored on that Friday night.
Right.
And they said that, if we've crowned the world champion tonight, if there happens to be a dead cast, we're gonna make the whole coon hunting world pretty mad. I think that's what they said.
Yeah. No, I think they made the right call there.
I do too. I really do. That ended up working out pretty good for us. We all ended up drawing those cards then, and there's a couple of us were a little leery at first, but we ended up just sort of thinking it through and like, well, we got a 60% chance of not having to hunt tonight, or we can just have a 100% chance of knowing we're going to hunt tonight. So for our late round, so we just sort of decided unanimously, everyone agreed to it and everything, and they got it all on video and everything. Trevor did.
Yeah.
And we ended up drawing out a 1, so we didn't have to hunt till the next night. So we got through to theirs, as well as Jeremiah and Tyler.
Yeah.
So then Kurt and Bryce Matthews had to go out and hunt late, and Kurt ended up getting it done there. But you could really tell the next night Whitey was pretty tired.
Yeah, he had that extra round. That's hard on a dog, have to hunt an extra late round. But that Whitey's a good coon dog, and you guys, there were 4 really good dogs in that final cast.
Oh, absolutely.
Those are real talented coon treeing dogs. I've hunted with 3 of them, and I guarantee you the 4th one probably is too. So,
yep.
They're tough to beat. Even a tired Whitey is tough to beat.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the whole it looked like on the live feed and all that stuff. Of course, everybody that's listening to this probably watched a lot of that coverage. If you haven't seen the coverage of that, go to UKC's YouTube channel. It was fantastic. As they always do. They always do a fantastic job at that. But it looked like Hawk just left the country.
Yep.
Is that pretty much what happened?
It is, yeah. So when Jenna took off barking and whatnot, he just sort of, him and Sleepy both, they just sort of road raced down that path then.
Yeah.
Is what they basically did. Everything ended up getting struck in through there, and we got up there, and the 8 caught us after we scored Jenna and Whitey's tree, and what had happened was Hawk had run off. So a lot of the good timber was to the east, and we figured dogs would break off this path, and they ended up not. Sleepy and Hawk just burnt down it, and they got split up from each other. And Sleepy ended up curling back around towards this little tree row that went off of this big woods to the north. And Hawk shot right off the end of it, and he kept going, and there wasn't a tree for probably nearly 2 miles after that. And it was a bad break. Well, we got to, the 8 was running on Jenna and Whitey. They restruck for 175, and the 8 was running on him, and I was thinking I was hearing him, so I asked, and a couple of the cast members thought they were hearing him, and so did the judge. So I said, well, strike and tree him. So that ended up breaking the other dog's 8, and then we walked out of this bowl that we were in up onto the levees. And when we got up there, they put the 2 on me, and I don't think I probably was hearing him, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
But it ended up working out real good, because then the rest of the guys got up there to where they could all hear their dogs, and have a good cast and everything up there hearing the dogs. And I didn't have anything to lose at that point, because I had 4th locked up. So it worked out, and we could hear him real good when we got up to the edge there. That would have worked out all right for me, but we didn't, and that still worked out just fine. I still took 4th, and I would have withdrawn a lot sooner, but Whitey was trailing around back towards the truck, and I didn't want to walk up on him until they got him treated in and got him handled. So I stuck with the cast, and Jenna looked phenomenal. She looked great. And they all I think that cast could go a different way any night. If we hunted it over and over again. But it was Jenna's night. She got in the good woods and she was operating. And I've hunted with Jenna a lot, and she. A lot of the time I've hunted with her has been in nasty conditions, and she goes like crazy. But she went plenty that night, but she got in the coons and she put on a real good show. I was real happy for Tyler.
What about future plans for you and Hawk? What hunt you guys planning on attending? I assume you're going to be out at Salem next week.
Yep, I'm planning on it. I've taken off a little bit too much time with work. I don't know about too much time, but
I say, is that even possible?
My uncle and a buddy of mine. Yeah, I work for my uncle and a buddy of mine. We put in garage doors, so they're pretty understanding of the coon hunts. They've both coon hunted quite a bit, so they're pretty understanding of that and everything. And I'd like to make it out to Youth Worlds. I've judged the last couple or few years out there, and I'd like to make it out. I don't think I'm going to be able to do it this year. I try to get caught up a little bit this year or try to get caught up a little bit more with work before I take off. I haven't got a lot of hours in for the last few weeks, so. But yeah, I'm planning on being out at Salem and everything, and we'll see how that goes. I'm kind of curious to see who's going to be showing up out there this year. I think some of the guys might not from that zone deal that some guy recommended.
Yeah. I wanted to get a zone up there closer to you.
Yeah, I wanted to see one in La Plata. I probably would have gone in La Plata.
I think La Plata was just a little too close to Salem, but I wanted to have it up there. Western Iowa somewhere, something like that, where all them western states guys can not have to drive so far. But the PKC will move them around. I'm sure maybe we'll get one over that way next year.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, I like going out for that week of the world hunt though. That's a fun vacation. It's usually right after harvest and everything for us, so it's a good time to wind down and go out there and have a good time with everybody. I really enjoy that hunt. That's one I'm definitely planning on, and I saw that the 2500 in Arkansas, another one of those shootout style hunts that they're doing. Yeah. So I'm planning on going to that also, and definitely nationals next year. And I'm hoping to have this the Hawk pup I've got now cranking pretty good for super stakes. My dad has a pup out of Hawk right now, out of Hawk and Pox. Yeah. Smallpox dog that Sears and Bingham used to own and everything, and my dad's got that pup out of there. He's got his 100 one. He's out of Hawk and Fox, and then I have one out of he's out of Darren DeGroat's dog and everything. Yeah. And Darren's got a bitch that's out of Mafia and Maxine. He had a litter mate back in the day and ended up buying this one dirt cheap out of Arkansas, and it's actually a really nice female.
Them dogs that have some age on them now out of Moff and Maxine.
Yeah, they're getting up there, but that whole cross ended up turning out pretty good, and I believe.
Maxine was a good female. Moffy was a good reproducer.
Oh, absolutely. I like a lot of that stuff. I like a lot of that doctor breeding and all that stuff from out in Indiana. Stuff Mike and Chuck are usually pushing, and obviously I went and bought one from them, but I also really like a lot of the shack dogs and the Mafia dogs that I've hunted with or hunted. Yeah, I do too. I get a hunt down here where I'm at. I run into a lot of them, and you run into a lot of good dogs. I hunted with Vic Hurley's got one out of shack called Joe. I hunted with down there pleasure hunting before zones. That's a good dog. There's a lot of good dogs out there. That English female crossed on shack. The one Ty Anderson has, the Dice dog, and Justin Parker has another one down there, littermate brother to it, and it was a good dog I hunted with hit down there too. So yeah, you get down to that southwest Missouri area, there's a lot of shack and Mafia stuff, and it's good. They're good coon dogs. Oh yeah, there's plenty of them and everything. And I think mine definitely got the mouth from it. Yeah, definitely. Hawk's been throwing some pretty good mouths in about all of his crosses I've made lately here. Yeah. But I really like this Mafia pup I've got. I'm hoping to have him cranking good for super stakes next year, but we'll just have to see on it. But yeah, speaking on those Mafia and shack dogs that are being pretty good, me and Darren actually owned one together. We had bought from Dan Clipperton. We didn't get along with her too good. Well, we sold her to Jeremiah Roller. He didn't get along with her. He sold her to a fella out in Pennsylvania, and she was in the Grand 16 at Autumn Oaks. Really? Neither of us. We talked about that and said, I didn't like her. Yeah. And And he said, "Oh, I didn't like her either." So then ended up selling them to them, and they loved her through it.
Good.
And she's doing pretty good now, I think. But
all right, Wyatt. It sounds like you guys got a lot of big plans coming up. I'm gonna run into you some hunts. Hopefully you're judging next time. So if I tree a coon, you'll see it.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I'd be all right with you judging me again.
Well, I try to get out of judging as much as I can anymore, but they still stick me with that card every now and then.
Yep. Yeah, I end up getting it quite a bit too, and I really don't mind it.
No, I don't mind it for the most part. I like it when I'm hunting scent, but when I'm hunting range, she chews so bad, and I worry about the two catching her every now and then, so I like in a PKC cast, I like to leave her and go get her handled. But with scent, it doesn't bother me too bad.
Yeah, for sure. But sorry if I ramble on a little bit and it's a little hard to follow or anything.
No, that makes it easy for me. I just get to sit back and watch the clock and listen. Those are the best ones to do.
Yep, for sure.
But I appreciate you sitting down with us, Wyatt, and congratulations on what you and Hawk have done. And you guys got a real bright future in the sport. And, for a young kid, you've done a lot, and I think you're going to keep it rolling. I'm happy for you and proud of you.
Well, I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. I hope we can get some more done with him. I think he's about 3,000 short platinum. I'd like to get that done, and then after that, we'll see. And I'll still keep hunting him, but hopefully move on to a pup out of him pretty soon here after that. And yeah, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. He's got his 5 wins for Tournament of Champions next year and whatnot, so we'll probably be at that also in the spring, and nationals, of course. And I really like what Trevor and Alan and everybody over at UKC does with that Tournament of Champions and the World Hunt.
They do a fantastic job.
Yeah. So I like what they do with that, and yeah, I like what you do with these podcasts too. So I really enjoy listening to them. I was pretty shocked and excited when you asked me to talk on it. I probably sound like an idiot on here, but I appreciate the offer. So
you're a world finalist now, Wyatt. You're a big deal.
Yeah, I know. I told everybody. I never thought I'd get so much attention for losing a UKC cast.
All right, Wyatt. I appreciate it, buddy. And look me up out there when you get to Salem. We'll go out and grab a bite to eat or something.
Sounds good. I'll plan on it. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Yep, thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to Mr. Wyatt Monen. We thank him for joining us. This is Josh Michaelis, and this is The Truth on the Houndsman XP Podcast Network.